Hi everyone. In this video we're going to do a quick overview on my Ford Fairlane of timing marks, ignition timing advanced mechanisms, and a timing light and how to use a timing light. So here's the Fairlane, all set up and ready for its video debut. I'll set my little camera mount up right here for the moment. Free my hands up. You know how I feel about safety glasses, so these are going to go on. Okay, so I'm going to reach in here. I'm going to take off the air cleaner so that we can get a little more access at the distributor. Now we reach in here, and here we go. So it doesn't look a whole lot different than the distributor we saw in my video on distributors. Here's my distributor cap. Here's the wires coming out. If you can count them, there's 8. This is a V8 engine. This is a Ford 302 in all its dirty glory. So Ford, first of all, when they number their cylinders, this is going to become important later on, they number them down the right bank of cylinders, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then down the left bank of cylinders, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it makes it nice and easy when you do a tune-up. It's a little more confusing when you rebuild the bottom end, knowing which rod is which, but fortunately it's a Ford, so you don't have to rebuild it that often. So, carbureted engine, here's my carburetor. This is a 4-barrel Holley carburetor. This is the choke plate. We have our primary 2 barrels that it runs off of, and then the secondary 2 barrels that it can run off of as it demands more air and fuel. If we look on the side of the carburetor, we see this vacuum line here, and if we follow that along, it goes to this vacuum advance can that we talked about in another video. So this is my vacuum advance mechanism in my distributor. We're going to pop this cap off and take a look inside. Lift the cap up and off. Let's see if I can move that out of the way. Okay, we look inside. This is the original points distributor, but it's been converted with an aftermarket module. This little red module here is known as a Unilight module. That's trademark name of Mallory Ignition. That's their little their conversion kit. If I can get a better view in here, you'll notice underneath the rotor, right here, there's this little black disc, and you notice there's some slots in it. Right in here, there's a photodiode, and there's an LED underneath, or maybe the photodiode's underneath and the LED's here, I don't know. There's a pair of little clear LED-looking things that stare at each other, and as we learned in our triggering devices video, when the light can pass through the slot, that produces a signal, and then when the light is blocked by these vanes, that produces a different signal. So this is basically taking the place of my points. There's a switching transistor built into it, so it doesn't need a separate ignition module. This is the whole deal. This is everything right here. So no more points to adjust, no condenser. Nice electronic ignition fully integrated into my original distributor. Little connector over here with 3 wires. One's a power, one's a ground, and one is a signal to the negative side of my coil over here. Ignition coil's mounted over here. Hangs off the front of the engine by the dipstick right there. So, pretty basic conventional ignition system. As I mentioned, we have the vacuum advance unit here. This little shiny silver lever right here that I'm pointing at with my screwdriver is what connects the vacuum can to the breaker plate. If we were to apply a vacuum to this hose, the breaker plate would move. And if you notice, when I grab a hold of the rotor here and I spin it, it will rotate forwards and snap back. That's the centrifugal advance mechanism that's down inside this distributor. That's going to advance our timing as the engine RPM goes up. And you can hear the weights snapping it back, so that's working properly. This was all serviced a few years ago when I built this engine. Well, I say a few. It's been more than a few, as you can tell by the look here. So, we're going to talk about timing marks and what those look like and how to find them, and how to line them up, and also what would be involved in taking the distributor out. I'm not going to actually take this distributor out, but we're going to talk about how it would be removed and put back in. So for the moment, we're going to leave this distributor cap off. I'm going to set my camera up right here. I'm going to grab the ratchet and deep socket here, and I'm going to put this down on the crankshaft. Actually, before I do that, come in here. If we look down on the front of the engine, you can actually see, I'll bring my flashlight in there, that little yellow pointer, that's actually cast right into the front timing cover of the engine. It's yellow because I hit it with a paint marker before we started this. And the gray piece right below it is the crankshaft harmonic balancer. You notice that that yellow pointer is not pointing at anything. We're going to rotate this until the timing mark lines up. Now, I'm going to rotate it and you're going to watch. How's that? So this engine naturally turns clockwise. I'm a big fan of only turning engines in the natural direction that they rotate for fear of timing belt or timing chain slack, which I know this engine doesn't have, but it's just still good practice nonetheless. Right about there, you can see my mark lined up. I only partially prepped that earlier. If we look down in there now, you can see that there's a mark on the harmonic balancer that lines up with the timing mark. So that's a top dead center mark. That mark indicates top dead center on the number 1 cylinder. And that mark actually had to be custom made in this balancer because that's a later balancer, and the later engines put the timing marks on the other side of the engine over here, and I can't have my timing mark over here because my radiator hose comes out on this side. The water pump outlet is on this side, and that would cover my timing marks up. So this is an early style front timing cover and water pump on a later style engine with a later balancer. So that mark is the actual only mark I have. I don't have any advanced marks or retard marks. It's the only one I have. I have a TDC mark. That was made with a piston stop that locked the engine right at top dead center, and I was able to make that mark in the balancer. So we'll come back to that again. All right. If we look up here at our distributor, you notice where the rotor's pointing. It's kind of pointing back this way. If we were to set the cap back on here, back this way is this wire right here. If we follow this down, this wire goes to the number 1 spark plug. So that's the number 1 spark plug wire. So we're set up at TDC on compression on the number 1 cylinder right now. If we were to spin this engine over 360 degrees, we would actually come up to TDC on number 1's companion cylinder on compression. Number 1 would be on the exhaust stroke, and the rotor would actually be pointing over here. So if we follow this over here, this one goes to cylinder number 6. So 1 and 6 are the companions on this engine. So I'm going to set this back down here. Now, if I were going to remove this distributor, I'm going to look down here, see if it's visible in the video. I'm trying to see. Yep. Right down here, this bolt holds a little clamp. So I would take that bolt out, this little clamp would come out, and I could lift this distributor right up out of the engine. Now, when I go to put the distributor back in, there's approximately 15 teeth on the distributor gear at the bottom, so there's basically 14 wrong ways to put this distributor in. So the way you figure out how to put it back in correctly is you first go down and you line up your timing marks with a ratchet, and you crank the engine over until your timing marks line up. You would have to confirm, if there was no distributor in there, you'd have to confirm that you were on the compression stroke of the number 1 cylinder. The easiest way to do that is to take the spark plug out, and you put the hose that you would use for your compression gauge into the cylinder, and as you're cranking the engine over, you'll feel pressure come out of that hose. So that's how you would know. If you have the distributor 180 degrees off, as a result of having the engine 360 degrees off, when you put that distributor in and try to start it, the engine's not going to start. It's probably going to backfire because it's going to be firing on the exhaust stroke rather than the compression stroke. And after you try to crank it a bunch of times, you'll have filled the exhaust system with unburnt fuel and air, and when the spark happens with the exhaust valve open, you're going to ignite that. So I've seen people explode mufflers and scare everybody in the shop when they have the engine 180 degrees off, or they have the distributor 180 degrees off, I should say. The engine's 360 degrees off. So very easy to put a compression tester adapter into the cylinder. Not so easy to pull the valve cover off and actually look at the rocker arms and look at the valves and see if they're both closed. So anyways, I know this is lined up at TDC on your compression stroke on number 1. In this position, I could put this distributor back in, but what I would have to do then, because this distributor can spin in the engine, I would have to set up a timing light and actually set the timing. So This is my timing light right here. It's an oldie but a goodie, it still works. The way this works, there's a strobe light in the front. There's a couple of clamps here for power and ground. It's powered off the car's electrical system. And there's an inductive clamp. This clamp is going to go on the number 1 spark plug wire, and every time the number 1 cylinder fires, it's going to cause this light to flash. And because it's a strobe light, because it's a very abrupt, bright flash of light, it has the ability to basically kind of freeze motion. So with the engine running, that timing mark would be invisible because it would be flying around. But if you flash a light at it every time the timing mark goes by, it'll appear to freeze. And I'm going to try to show you that without running my my hands or the timing light wires through the fan. This has a good old-fashioned rigid metal non-forgiving fan, and hopefully we can catch it in the shot and you know, do so without hurting ourselves, hurting myself. So I'm going to set my timing light up over here. The other thing that I have to do is I actually have to start this and let it warm up a little bit, because I haven't run this car in a few hours, so it's cold. Okay, we have power. Let's see if I can find a good ground here. Let's see if we can run these wires over here away from the fan. Okay, that looks pretty good. Okay, another thing that we need to do if we're going to be setting the timing on this, which I'm just going to give you a quick demonstration just so you can see the marks and how they appear to freeze with the timing light, or hopefully we can see. It's kind of bright out here today still. If you were actually setting the timing, two things you'd have to make sure of. You have to make sure that the idle speed is relatively low, because if your idle is too high, your centrifugal weights in the distributor could already be pulling out and advancing your timing. And you have to disconnect your vacuum advance. Now, there shouldn't be vacuum here at idle. This port on the carburetor is what they call a timed port. There's only vacuum here at part throttle. So at idle, there shouldn't be vacuum here, but it's good practice to disconnect this. So you can do it at either end. I'm going to pull this end off since the engine's not running. I have no fear of running my hand through the fan. And got a nice special tool here for plugging that so there's no vacuum leak. That's a golf tee. So we're going to put a golf tee in the vacuum hose. Kind of tuck it out of our way. Actually, yeah, that's good. Okay. The only other thing, as I said, this only has a TDC mark. It does not have an advance mark. So I'm hoping we can actually see the mark, because if it's over advanced, the timing mark is not going to show up right here in line with the pointer on the engine. It's going to show up way over here. It's going to be advanced. It's going to show up before that mark. So the way I have to set timing on this is with a more modern timing light. Since I only have a TDC mark, I need to use what's known as a dial-back timing light, or an advanced timing light. Those actually have a knob on the back, and I can turn the knob to a 10-degree setting, and then it basically changes the timing of the flash of the light, so it makes the mark appear at 10 degrees rather than at TDC. But I don't have one of those timing lights here right now, so we're stuck with my old-fashioned one. I'm going to come around here, start the car up. Runs pretty good considering I haven't driven this car in 3 years. We'll give it just a moment on high idle, and then I'll hit the accelerator to kick the high idle down and kick the choke off. 94,020 miles on it. Not too bad. Needs a dashboard. The dashboard itself needs to be painted. Needs the dash cap. There's a towel on the seat because there's a hole in it. Alright. Down at a reasonably low idle. That's not the lowest idle this thing goes to, but we'll give it a try. microphone is on this phone. So, hopefully you can still hear me. The choke is still partially closed, so I know it's not really warmed up. And we're probably not at base idle here. Maybe. Well, I guess that's about as low as we're going to get it. So, reach over here, get my flashlight. Look down here, and you can notice, you can see the harmonic balancer is spinning. I'm going to try to not put my phone into the fan. The fan's obviously spinning. Shine my flashlight down there, you can see a little better. So there's no chance we're going to see a timing mark if it's moving. It is, of course, unless we have a timing light. So if I flash this timing light at you, see it flickers and flashes, and actually my camera doesn't really appreciate it. I'll try shining it at the fender. There we go. So that's interesting. The frame rate of the camera does not really appreciate the flash rate of the strobe. Makes it kind of hard to see. Alright, hopefully you'll be able to see that timing mark. Yep, there it is. I'm not getting a steady flash out of this light. Either my light's giving up here, or I have a bad connection. Make sure we have good positive. Scratch my ground up a little bit. That's better. Alright. Am I showing my light? No, I thought it was better. So I'm hoping you were able to notice that timing mark sort of appear there when I hit the trigger on the timing light. So the flashing of the timing light makes the crankshaft damper appear to stop even though it's still moving. And that allows us to set our timing. If I had loosened this bolt down here on the distributor, I would then be able to turn the distributor back and forth while watching that mark. And that mark would either advance or retard based on what I did with the distributor. So that would allow me to set my base timing. Then the timing advance would take it from there. Speaking of timing advance, if I rev this up, we should be able to make that timing mark move, which I'm going to try to find a way that I can set this camera up. I really don't want to put my camera into the fan. Look at that. This little rubber camera mount I got is pretty awesome. There we go. Seems to work. So, here's my timing mark. Hopefully you can see it. As I bring the RPMs up, that timing mark should move. Alright, so hopefully you were able to see that timing mark actually move as the advance mechanism did its job. That's kind of cool. So, obviously not something you're going to have to do on a modern car. They might still give you a timing mark on a modern car, but there's no timing adjustment anymore since we use distributorless ignition. Wherever they mount the crankshaft position sensor on the engine is a non-adjustable location. It's going to have no effect on your timing. So, sort of some antiquated stuff here, but nonetheless something you should know how to do. And look at that, we managed to get this recorded in under 25 minutes, so my phone didn't stop recording and make me do a part 2, so that's kind of cool. It occurred to me after I got this all set up, if I had disconnected this line at the other end, over here, I might have been able to hook up my little handheld Mighty Vac pump and put vacuum into that, or, you know, done like I had done in the other video and actually just sort of sucked on that hose, and you could have watched it advance the timing that way, but I didn't really think of it until now. So, anyways, I'm going to put my air cleaner back on, take my timing light off of here, and put this stuff away. So, hope you enjoyed this video. It was a fun video to make. It gave me a reason to start this car up, which I haven't done in, like I say, at least 2 years. I know it's been at least 2 years since I've driven it. I may have started it since then. I don't know. The battery was definitely dead. I had to charge the battery up to be able to start it up and bring it over here. It was parked over at my folks' house, so brought it over here and did this video. So kind of cool. Gave me a reason to do something with the car. So hope you enjoyed it. Hope you liked getting a glimpse at that points eliminator module there, and you know how a timing light works. It's a shame it wasn't flashing steadily enough to really give a good indication, but hopefully it shows up in the video. I guess I'll find out when I upload it later. So, talk to you tomorrow, guys.